Ready? Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Bhagavad Gita Ashtottara Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Bhagavad Gita Ashtottara Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavin Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. One second. All righty.
The rest of those on the sheets. You took a sheet.
Oh, got it.
They were right there.
Oh.
But fortunately, I missed one, so there was one for you to take. Otherwise, you would have, I was afraid you were back with that. Oh no.
Okay. Now I have a new setup. My new bookmark, and here's a pen, and we will write each verse, so never again will you have to worry. But for today, boy, oh, here we go. Well, that's not it.
It's I know it's going to be the verses that are 50 through something.
Yeah,
you know, like
51.
51 to 53. Okay, all right, that makes it easy. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 12th day of July, 2023? Probably. Oh, God. Is it 12th?
Yeah.
It's the 12th. All right, let me have a new start. And tomorrow is also Ekadashi. All right. On this 12th day of July, 2023, in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're in chapter 18, conclusion, the perfection of renunciation, text 51 to 53. So we'll just do the first one. We'll chant it, and then we'll go on. Buddhya Vishuddhaya Yukto Dhrityatmanam Niyamyacha Shabdadin Vishayangs Tyaktva Raga Dveshau Vyudasyacha Buddhya Vishuddhya Yukto Dhrityatmanam Niyamyacha Shabdadin Vishayangs Tyaktva Raga Dveshau Vyudasyacha Buddhya Vishuddhya Yukto Dhrityatmanam Niyamyacha Shabdadin Vishayangs Tyaktva Raga Dveshau Vyudasyacha Buddhya Vishuddhya Yukto Dhrityatmanam Niyamyacha Shabdadin Vishayangs Tyaktva Raga Dveshau Vyudasyacha. Krishna. Buddhya Vishuddhya Yukto Dhrityatmanam Niyamyacha Shabdadin Vishayangs Tyaktva Raga Dveshau Vyudasyacha. Not today? Go ahead. Buddhya Vishuddhya Yukto Dhrityatmanam Niyamyacha Shabdadin Vishayangs Tyaktva Raga Dveshau Vyudasyacha. All right, I'll chant the other two and then we'll do the synonyms. Vivikta sevi lagbashi yatavakaya manasaha dhyana yoga paro nityam vairagyam samapashitaha ahankaram balang darpam kamam krodham parigraham vimucya nirmama shanto brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Okay, buddhya with the intelligence, vishuddhya fully purified, yuktaha and engaged, dvitya by determination, atmanam the self, niyamya regulating, cha also, shabda adin such as sound, vishayan the sense objects, Tyaktva giving up, raga attachment, dveshau and hatred, vyudasya laying aside, cha also. Okay, that was for the first verse, so we'll just read the translation now. What is that? Hare Krishna. Translation. Being purified by his intelligence and controlling the mind with determination. This side, Prabhu. That side, yeah. Being purified by his intelligence and controlling the mind with determination, giving up the object of sense gratification, being freed from attachment and hatred, one who lives in a secluded place, who eats little, who controls his body, mind, and power of speech, who is always in trance and who is detached, free from false ego, false strength, false pride, lust, anger, and acceptance of material things, free from false proprietorship, and peaceful, such a person is certainly elevated to the position of self-realization. And if you notice in that very last line, that's Brahma Bhuyaya, the Brahma Bhuta platform, which will be explained in the next verse. Purport. When one is purified by intelligence, he keeps himself in the mode of goodness. Thus one becomes the controller of the mind and is always in trance. He is not attached to the object of sense gratification, and he is free from attachment and hatred in his activities. Such a detached person naturally prefers to live in a secluded place. He does not eat more than what he requires, and he controls the activities of his body and mind. He has no false ego because he does not accept the body as himself. Nor has he a desire to make the body fat and strong by accepting so many material things. Because he has no bodily concept of life, he is not falsely proud. He is satisfied with everything that is offered to him by the grace of the Lord, and he is never angry in the absence of sense gratification. Nor does he endeavor to acquire sense objects. Thus, when he is completely free from false ego, he becomes non-attached to all material things, and that is the stage of self-realization of Brahman. That stage is called the Brahma Bhuta stage. When one is free from the material conception of life, he becomes peaceful and cannot be agitated. This is described in the Bhagavad Gita 270. Apuryamanam achalapatishtam samudamapa pravashanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravashanti sarve sashanti mapnoti nakama kami. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So, now Krishna is setting the stage for the final verses of this chapter, which more or less summarize the whole teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is giving prerequisites for entering into this Brahma Bhuta platform. We're on page 693. Yeah, because you have a different printing. Yeah. Ladies on this side, if you want to. Oh, okay. Hare Krishna. So, he's developed this detachment, and all of these prerequisites come. Now, for devotees, they are naturally come. Here he's describing kind of in the way of yoga, of Ashtanga yoga, in a secluded place. Well, we're not in a secluded place here. We're in the middle of a city. And there's 5 of us here and there's some out there. So what gives? This is on the yoga platform. This is like from chapter 6. He lives in a secluded place, he eats little, controls the body, mind, power of speech. Now, it's not that devotees don't do that, but they do it by engaging those things in the service of Krishna. And Prabhupada said this is a secluded place, means that it's free from the disturbances. It's meant to be free from the disturbances of the hurly-burly world. You know, we're in San Diego, but in one sense we're not in San Diego because we're not participating in what makes San Diego a big city and like that. Yeah, in other words, the temple is meant to be a place where you can develop these qualities, even without these technical aspects. And really, Brahma Bhuta is not the end of Krishna consciousness. It's actually a subordinate position. Once you advance in Krishna consciousness, it naturally comes. And in fact, in chapter 14, we have at the end of the chapter, and right near the end of the chapter, that chapter deals with the modes of nature. And at the end, near the end of the chapter, Krishna, there you go. Yeah, try to keep on. Krishna, Arjuna asks, well, what are the characteristics of one who has transcended the modes of nature? And how does one transcend them? Very logical question. So Krishna has a description, something like this, of the qualities of one who's transcendental. And then he speaks a verse, a very famous verse. Mam chiyova bicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatitaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Brahma bhuyaya, brahma bhuta is the same here. In fact, here at the last line is exactly those words, brahma bhuyaya. So what does he say there? Mam chiyo avyabhicharena bhakti. One who practices avyabhichara means uninterrupted, no breaks. And it's understood, bhakti yogena sevate. Bhakti yogena means everything engaged in my service for out of love. Bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatitaitan. Such a person transcends the modes of nature and attains this Brahma Bhuta platform. So there, in that verse, he gives an alternate, explanation of how one can achieve it, which is practical for us. And you'll see the Brahma Bhuta platform here culminates in bhakti. In other words, they're completely intertwined. The next verse, which is very famous, will describe that. Okay, but you can see if we would try to, because here this verse doesn't mention bhakti, right? These three verses, there's no mention of bhakti yoga here. So we're back to kind of, the techniques of pranayama, controlling mind, power, and speech, always in trance, free from false ego. It's quite a prescription, You can't just say, I'm going to achieve this and go off somewhere. It's not easy. It's all these things moving you. So, but in the next verse, he says, you achieve this Brahma Bhuta platform, and then the next stage is Mad Bhakti. So there's an explanation for what the verse in chapter 14 seems to contradict. It said, you practice bhakti and you achieve Brahma Bhuta. And this one seems you practice Brahma Bhuta and you achieve bhakti. So where's the difference? I figured it out. So we'll let you know. Okay, any questions on this verse? Now one reference about this verse quoted in the purport. This is a famous verse from the 2nd chapter where it's describing just like an ocean. Here we are in the Pacific Ocean. It's perfectly named. It means peaceful, right? Pacific Ocean. Relatively compared to the Atlantic, that's why they call it that. Not as many storms. But the idea is that, okay, there's so many rivers that are running into this Pacific Ocean, but it doesn't get agitated from all those running in. It doesn't really rise, from that. It may rise if Antarctica melts, but that's another point. But the thing is, the ocean is ready to accept all of these tributaries and things, but it remains specific. It remains peaceful. So someone who is realized all of these kama ayam pravashanti sarva. In other words, kama here means stimuli for sense gratification. You're exposed to all of these different things, but they don't attract you. This is real vairagya. If you're enjoying within the pleasure of thinking of Krishna, serving Krishna, then Maya releases you from the grip. That's mentioned in the 14th chapter. Daiviyesha gunami mama maya dorotyaya. Very difficult to cross over this divine energy of mind composed of the modes of nature. But one who surrenders unto me easily crosses beyond it. Now how is that? Because this Maya, this Daivi Maya, Mahamaya, she's a servant of Krishna. She's actually an expansion of Yoga Maya, his internal energy. And she has the thankless task of being like the prison warden. That's what Durga means. You can't go. It's a word for prison. I'll probably use fort, Durga. But she doesn't relish that. She'd much rather release her bonds from someone who is surrendering and serving her master. In other words, Krishna knows, okay, this is a sincere devotee, release him to this degree. In other words, it's like a spectrum. The more that you become attracted and surrendered to Krishna, and you're thinking of him, the less the allurements of Maya can attract you. You know what I mean? It's because you're on a different plane. You're enjoying a different kind of pleasure. That's what it comes down to. And that's how we can stay on the Brahmabhuta platform. And Krishna will describe the benefits of that in the next verse, the famous verse. All right, any questions on these verses? All right. Text 54. Now this one is worth memorizing if you're into that. Brahmabhuta pasannatma nashojati nakangshati samaksarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim nabate param. One who is thus transcendently situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He is equally disposed toward every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. Purport. To the impersonalist, achieving the Brahmabhuta stage, becoming one with the Absolute, is the last word. But for the personalist or pure devotee, one has to go still further, and to become engaged in pure devotional service. This means that one who is engaged in pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord is already in the state of liberation, called Brahmabhuta, oneness with the Absolute. Without being one with the Supreme, the Absolute, one cannot render service unto Him. In the Absolute conception, there is no difference between the served and the servitor, yet the distinction is there in a higher spiritual sense. In the material concept of life, when one works for sense gratification, there is misery. But in the absolute world, when one is engaged in pure devotional service, there is no misery. The devotee in Krishna consciousness has nothing for which to lament or desire. Since God is full, a living entity who is engaged in God's service in Krishna consciousness becomes also full in himself. He is just like a river cleansed of all dirty water. Because a pure devotee has no thought other than Krishna, he is naturally always joyful. He does not lament for any material loss or aspire for gain, because he is full in the service of the Lord. He has no desire for material enjoyment, because he knows that every living entity is a fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and therefore eternally a servant. He does not see in the material world someone as higher and someone as lower. Higher and lower positions are ephemeral, and a devotee, that means temporary, and a devotee has nothing to do with ephemeral appearances or disappearances. For him, stone and gold are of equal value, and this is an echo from the 6th chapter. There's a verse like that. You see, stone and gold is the same. This is the Brahmabhuta stage, and this stage is attained very easily by the pure devotee. In that stage of existence, the idea of becoming one with the Supreme Brahman and annihilating one's individuality becomes hellish. The idea of attaining the heavenly kingdom becomes a phantasmagoria, and the senses are like serpents whose poisoned teeth are broken. As there is no fear of a serpent with broken teeth, there is no fear from the senses when they are automatically controlled. The world is miserable for the materially infected person, but for a devotee, the entire world is as good as Vaikuntha or the spiritual sky. The highest personality in this material universe is no more significant than an ant for a devotee. Such a stage can be achieved by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, who preached pure devotional service in this age. So, I don't know if you recognize there's a verse there that Prabhupada is translating, the famous verse, which I'll get into in a minute. So, these are the qualities of one who is on the Brahmabhuta platform. First is prasannatma, means naturally joyful. Can you just imagine that? I mean, now, we have material life is long stretches where you're not really joyful. You're anticipating some joy that you'll get from the money you earn or whatever, It's just drudgery, work, whatever it is. And there's the moments of sense gratification may last a little while, but it's temporary, as I like to point out, quoting verse 522, which is always pertinent. Yehi sangsbhaja boga dukkha yona evate ajandabanta konteya nateshu ramate buddhaha. The intelligent person does not take part in the pleasures that derive or are due to the contact of the senses with the sense objects. O son of Kunti, such pleasures are the sources of misery, and they are temporary. They have a beginning and an end, and so the wise do not delight in them. You see? So, that's kind of bleak. Because that's like, generally, you know, if you're an ordinary person, that's the only kind of pleasures we know. Okay, it may be the mind that gets attached, you know, that's another sense, but that's described, that's the sixth sense. Your mind can be an object of enjoyment or an object of pain if you're depressed and you're, you know, whatever. So the mind is also there. But when the mind is always fixed on Krishna and on your relationship with Krishna, then, you know, I'm just hearing the 10th canto. I recorded it, by the way. If you'd like to hear the 10th canto, just write to me and I'll give you a nice link. You can download it and hear the whole 10th canto with occasional. I mean, these are the translations from the book. Prabhupada wrote the Krishna book. That's another thing, and others have recorded that. And it's described there that like these prayers of the residents of Vrindavan. When Uddhava visits, you know, Krishna was kind of stuck in Dwarka, you know, he couldn't leave. And he's fulfilling so many duties there in relation to all the queens and everything. So he sent Uddhava to Vrindavan to console those who are in separation. The gopis, the boys, they're all like burning in, you know, separation from. So he comes and he stays like at least a month, I think maybe 2 months. And every day he's meeting them and he's glorifying Krishna and he's seeing their incredible love for him in separation. How the gopis are crying, they're always fixed on him, and Mother Yashoda and everything. So at the end, when he's leaving, there's this wonderful little prayer by the residents, you know, and they say, may our thoughts always dwell in Krishna. May our hands and feet always serve him. May we never forget them, you know, him like that, you know. Now, what's so touching about that is that they're already steeped constantly in Krishna consciousness, but still they're anxious that they never lose that. They want to pray, and you know, that to Krishna that he'll keep them in that state. So that's in 1 second. So that state is available to everyone. That's our natural state. That's like one of the basics of Krishna consciousness you have to accept, because it's not intuitive right away, because everything is, you know, different than what you're used to, and so it's a process. But the faith in the reality that we as spirit souls have this eternal relationship with Krishna, and if we live in that relationship and cultivate that, then we can come to the point of unbroken happiness. Not even broken by death and disease or anything. That, you know, you eventually shuck off this material body and you continue with that service and that relationship. And that's our natural state. So this Brahma Bhuta, in that situation of being free from the modes of nature and attachment, that itself is joyful, not hankering, not lamenting, seeing everyone equally as a spirit soul. Mad bhaktim labate param. Now, the other verse said that one who is engaged in my service, bhakti yoga, then he comes to the point of Brahma Bhuta. Now this one says, on the Brahma Bhuta platform, you reach that, then you attain my bhakti. One is bhakti yoga, and one is bhakti. The residents of Goloka Vrindavan, they're not practicing bhakti yoga. They're not practicing at all. They're already in bhakti, you know. Bhakti yoga, this is sadhana, all the do's and don'ts in the process, gets you to the point of bhakti. And then it becomes second nature. It's just your natural way of living. It's not something that you have to, you know, practice. Oh, you got to get up early in order to see Krishna off to the forest. No, you know, you want to see him. You want to, you know, drink in the beauty of, you know, him playing the flute as he goes off. It's not a practice. That's why at the end Krishna says, give up all dharma. Dharma is a practice, you know, by which you can achieve bhakti. That's right in the second chapter. Sabai pungsang paro dharma yato bhaktir hokchaje ahaitu kurya pratiyata yaba supersediti. Supersediti means fully satisfied. This is the beginning of the Bhagavatam. The sages wanted to know, what is that dharma by which one can, the soul can be completely satisfied? You know, not that you can get liberation or anything like that you be completely satisfied. So that's the answer. But once achieving that state of full satisfaction, there's no more practice. The gopis aren't practicing. Mother Yashoda is not practicing. She's just worried, does Krishna have enough to eat? You know, and he'll come to me, you know, and then, oh God. You know, it's like, it's a state of bliss. So, So the Brahmagupta platform is important to understand and the nature of it, and it's described nicely in this purport. But it's the end result of all of this effort is pure devotional service, and that's mentioned here. You had your hand up first, Buddha.
So we can talk, it's not just us listening?
You can ask a question now, yeah.
Can I comment?
Go ahead.
You talked about,
Oh, yeah, use the mic, I'm sorry, because we have a lot of people on YouTube.
Okay, you talked about obtaining a state of complete happiness, free from sorrow and things. I just want to comment that for the Bhagavad Gita also says that relief is not immediate. It may take some time to get to that point.
Yes, sure.
That even if you don't feel ecstatically joyful in the moment, keep at it and you'll get there. And Krishna, you can trust Krishna with that. He's a roller coaster ride full of surprises, from what I've seen.
That's due to our up and down nature, because yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a process. It's based on association. You can associate with someone who's showing some of those qualities, and that's why it's so valuable to have Srila Prabhupada's association through this purport. As I was reading the previous purport, and Prabhupada is describing all of these states, he says, well, when you realize that he's describing things that he himself is feeling, and there's a certain point where nobody's going to write this, without having direct realization of it. Because I have read, you may have been exposed to other commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita, and they're very analytical, dry, this and that, and oftentimes, completely fallacious. Prabhupada tells a story. I think it's in the introduction. One fellow was speculating, and he said, "Oh, it's a conversation between the psychiatrist and the patient. Arjuna is the patient." And then there was another one that came up in the class of that Arjuna is the golfer and Krishna is the caddy. Didn't they make a movie? Right? Bhagavad Gita. They're like, come on,
That's supposed to be based on the Bhagavad Gita?
Yes. Yes. Huh? Something in Bhagavad Gita. The legend of Bhagavad Gita.
I haven't seen it.
I heard of it many years ago. It's like 25 years old. Yeah, I mean, and Prabhupada is, this is one of the reasons he wrote this Gita. You look at the preface, he says, because he wrote it soon after he came to America, and a lady was asking, well, what Bhagavad Gita do you recommend? And Prabhupada said, I couldn't recommend any of them that exist, because they're not pure, so that's why he started writing his own. It has to be explained by a pure devotee, someone who's realized and can instill in you faith in the process. That's the key. By the association of genuine devotees, your faith is nourished. Essential verse, third canto, spoken by Lord Kapila Dev to his mother, his teachings. Satam prasangan mama virya samvido bhavandiritkhana rasayana katha tadjoshanarash abhavarga vartmani shraddha rati bhaktir anukramishiti. So this is a part of 8 verses in the third canto. And I saw, this is 8 verses, and it's a whole lesson on the value of associating with sadhus, sadhu sangha, the famous satsang that we all hear about. So I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but this is like the critical verse right in the middle. And he says, if you really find sadhus as defined in previous verses, now this is like the 4th or 5th verse in the series, here's what you'll experience. Satam prasangan. So satam is another word for sadhu, or sadhus. The sat is another word for devotees. Satam prasangan. And prasangan, every word is so important. There's sangha and there's prasanga. The pra means like a prefix in English would be ultra or super. There's dancing and there's super dancing. Let's go, whatever. I mean, whatever. It's like that's what pra is. So this is prolonged and intense and meaningful association. So with the sadhus, satam prasangan mama virya samvado. In that association, you will hear. Now this is Kapila Dev speaking, who is an incarnation of Krishna. You will hear my glories. Mama virya. Virya means powerful activities. Samvido, conversation. Bhavanti, now what happens when you hear that? Bhavanti rit kana rasayana. It acts as a life-giving elixir and the light for the ear and the heart. Rit karna, rit is heart, karna is ear. Rit kana rasayana kata. That kata, that glorification of Krishna. And we have that in Prabhupada's books, the recorded lectures, and sincere followers can also do that. What's the result of that? Tadjoshanat, by practicing. He said, the next verse says, this is the easiest form of yoga. Just show up. You're practicing that. I'm, not a sadhu, but when I read the purports, you're getting the benefit. But the point is that that's what this whole association, this whole society is meant for that. He set it up in such a way that people can hear about Krishna and glorify Krishna, of course, chant Hare Krishna like that. So here's the result. Tadjoshanat, engaging in that, ashu apavarga vartmani, quickly on this path of apavarga. Now this verse is very important. Apavarga means the path of liberation. Why apavarga? In Sanskrit, if you go to the back of the book, the major books, hardback books like the Gita and all the Bhagavatam, CC, you'll see a Sanskrit pronunciation guide. Now in the CC is also Bengali pronunciation. And you see the letters, the alphabet, and there's also instruction how to pronounce each letter. It's good if you want to chant the verses to really get familiar with that. But the consonants, there's different groups of consonants. They're called vargas. And the first letter of each group is what that varga is named after. So there's a varga called the pa varga. So the pa varga consists of the letter P. These are all labials. They are just sounded on the lips. You don't have to do anything in the mouth with the tongue and everything. So pa, ba, and ma. There's 5 of them. P-A and P-H-A, like in pala. The word it's called phala for fruit. So P, P-H, B, B-H, and M. So each one stands for another element of the suffering in the material world that you get free on because it's apavarga. Apa means against or counteracting. So this is apavarga vartmani, the path of liberation. So what do they stand for? Pa is parishrama, means hard labor to try to make ends meet in this world. The hard, what is the struggle for existence, Prabhupada called it, So that's pa, and it's to such an extent that you kind of foam at the mouth. That's painila, and Prabhupada refers to the horses. After a horse race, you see. So very hard labor, working hard, and vyartata, frustration. You work here, you aspire here, you go here, you meet this person, whatever it is, and there's always change, and it's being destroyed, and you're getting older. So you're getting futility, and then as time goes on, what comes up is the BH, which is a big one, bhaya, fear. Because everything that you value is being taken away, including your life, your health, your family, whatever. And, is waiting, death and disease and death. And finally, the M stands for mrityu, which is death. So this is the apavarga vartmani, the path of getting free of all those things, by moving toward liberation, going back to God, and living on the spiritual plane, free of all of this encumbrance of matter. That's what. So then the last verse describes what the benefits are besides getting liberation. You're nourishing shraddha, ratir, bhakti, anukramishati. Step by step, you're deepening your faith in the process because you're getting direct experience. You've been in a big kirtan. We're going to have Rath Yatra in a couple of weeks. You just come out, show up, go on the procession, chant, and you'll experience the joy. You're not going to you probably won't be crying right away or rippulating. You know what that means? Hair standing on end. No one ever uses that word. But it means hair standing on end. All right, but you'll experience some happiness of Krishna consciousness without any, going through the forest or anything. So the idea that can be, with our efforts, purification, austerity, and practice, can be deepened more and more, and our the evil effects of being in the material world can be ended. So shraddha is deepened. That's important because that's a foundation. Now I have faith that this chanting will work and this will work and so forth. And then you get rati, attraction, and bhakti, which here means pure bhakti, pure devotional service, pure love for Krishna. All by association. That was Lord Chaitanya's open movement. Just come to the kirtan, you chant, and you hear. You hear in the kirtan, then you sit down and hear Krishna Katha. You read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that's what's going on. You know, Lord Chaitanya have these big meetings, sometimes small meetings, but it's always holy name is vibrating, and then wonderful instruction that he's giving to Rupa Goswami, he's hearing from Ramananda Roy, and you can participate in that by reading the book. So that's what's happening. Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. So the Brahmabhuta platform is kind of a foundation, but then what it results in is real devotion to me, pure devotion to me. That's what Krishna is saying here. And then the next verse is even more important. I think we have time if there's no questions or comments. This verse is always quoted. Text 55. Bhaktya mama vijanati yavanyaschasmi tattvataha tatoman tattvato gyatva vishate tadanantaram. One can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me, by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and his plenary portions cannot be understood by mental speculation, nor by the non-devotees. If anyone wants to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he has to take to pure devotional service under the guidance of a pure devotee. Otherwise, the truth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead will always be hidden. As already stated in Bhagavad Gita 7.25, Naham Prakasha Sarvasya. He is not revealed to everyone. No one can understand God simply by erudite scholarship or mental speculation. Only one who is actually engaged in Krishna consciousness and devotional service can understand what Krishna is. University degrees are not helpful. One who is fully conversant with Krishna's science becomes eligible to enter into the spiritual kingdom, the abode of Krishna. Becoming Brahman does not mean that one loses his identity. Devotional service is there, and as long as devotional service exists, there must be God, the devotee, and the process of devotional service. Such knowledge is never vanquished, even after liberation. Liberation involves getting free from the concept of material life. In spiritual life, Liberation involves getting free from the concept of material life. In spiritual life, the same distinction is there, the same individuality is there, but in pure Krishna consciousness. One should not mistakenly think that the word vishate enters into me supports the monist theory that one becomes homogeneous with the impersonal Brahman. No. Vishate means that one can enter into the abode of the Supreme Lord in one's individuality to engage in his association and render service unto him. For instance, a green bird enters a green tree not to become one with the tree, but to enjoy the fruits of the tree. Impersonalists generally give the example of a river flowing into the ocean and merging. This may be a source of happiness for the impersonalist, but the personalist keeps his personal individuality, like an aquatic in the ocean. We find so many living entities within the ocean if we go deep. Surface acquaintance with the ocean is not sufficient. One must have complete knowledge of the aquatics living in the ocean depths. Because of his pure devotional service, a devotee can understand the transcendental qualities and the opulences of the Supreme Lord in truth. As it is stated in the 11th chapter, only by devotional service can one understand. The same is confirmed here. One can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by devotional service and enter into his kingdom. After attainment of the Brahmabhuta stage of freedom from material conceptions, devotional service begins by one's hearing about the Lord. When one hears about the Supreme Lord, automatically the Brahmabhuta stage develops, and material contamination, greediness, and lust for sense enjoyment disappears. As lust and desires disappear from the heart of a devotee, he becomes more attached to the service of the Lord, and by such attachment he becomes free from material contamination. In that state of life he can understand the Supreme Lord. This is the statement of Srimad Bhagavatam also. After liberation, the process of bhakti or transcendental service continues. The Vedanta Sutta 4.1.12 confirms this. Prayanat tatrapi hidrishtam. This means that after liberation, the process of devotional service continues. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, real devotional liberation is defined as the reinstatement of the living entity in his own identity, his own constitutional position. The constitutional position is already explained. Every living entity is a part and parcel fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, his constitutional position is to serve. After liberation, this service is never stopped. Actual liberation is getting free from misconceptions of life. Hare Krishna. Quite the purport, verse and purport here. So, one of the basic principles here is that this word tattvataha. This comes up 3 times in 3 verses in the Gita. In this verse, it appears twice. Famously, in the 4th chapter, text 9, Krishna says, "Janma karma cha me divyam, evam yo veti tattvataha, tyaktva deham punar janma naiti mameti sorjana." That one who understands the transcendental, one who understands in truth the transcendental nature of my birth and activities, does not take birth again after death, but comes to me. In other words, but one has to understand in truth. That's the difficulty. How can you understand it in truth? Well, one second. One has to approach one who knows and serve. This is the importance of the guru, the spiritual master. Krishna describes in that same chapter, text 34, Tad vidhi, if you want to run that, what he just explained, the truth of bhakti, Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti tegyaram jnananas tattvadarshinaha. A tattvadarshi is someone who has seen the truth. In other words, someone who's completely pure and is seeing the Lord within and without, is realized. Everything is by revelation. We are, in bhakti, we're simply trying to get the grace of the Lord so he'll reveal himself more and more to us. And the more that pure our heart is in whatever we do, in the chanting, in the service, in meditation, the more that Krishna will be pleased to reveal himself to us. Otherwise, there's no way of knowing. That's why this verse is so important. Bhakti mama vijanati yavanyastasmi tattva. I can be known in truth only by the process of bhakti. And what's the benefit? Then if you really understand me, then when you leave this body, you go back to Godhead. Enter into the spiritual world, which is not different from Krishna. So we had a purport where Prabhupada was, he was actually quoting a verse. I mentioned that? So he's describing Lord Chaitanya. This is a verse by Prabodhananda Saraswati in a verse called the Chaitanya Chandramrita. If you're interested in the book, I can give you a PDF of it. But it's, how many verses? Almost 200 verses glorifying Lord Chaitanya. They're all very beautiful. And one of the verses is this, which Prabhupada would always quote. One who has been empowered by the merciful sidelong glance of Lord Chaitanya, in other words, who's gotten mercy and grace of the Lord by participating in the Sankirtan movement like that, and following. So here's a mentality, and he goes through a list. Kaivalyam nadakayate, to dashapur akasha pushpayate, durdantendriyakara sarvapatadi prodkata dangstrayate. Vishram purna sukhayate, vidimahindra adishtakitayate, yat karunya kataksha vaibhavatam, tam golden vastamak. I glorify this Lord Chaitanya, the golden avatar. One who's been empowered by his merciful sidelong glance due to full participation in the Sankirtan movement. Hare Krishna, welcome. We will have darshan in 10 minutes. You're almost in time. We're just finishing up Bhagavad Gita class. You're welcome to sit and listen. So the first thing is Kaivalyam Narakayate. Kaivalyam is merging into the existence of the Supreme, losing one's identity. Sayujya. Yeah. This is actually the ladies' side. So if you can sit on the bench if you like. Or on the, yeah. You can sit, yeah, you can sit there, you sit there. It's perfect. So, Kaivalyam Narakayate. I don't know if these words are familiar to you. But he's saying, for one who has been empowered by the merciful sidelong glance of Lord Chaitanya, who's Krishna himself, then merging into the existence of the Supreme, into Brahman, and losing one's identity is like going to hell. Because without Krishna and the devotee, there's no process of bhakti. And it's the bhakti that the bhakta wants to do, not just to be free of the bonds of birth, death, old age, and disease. And Prabhupada, although he doesn't quote the Sanskrit, he mentions the Bhagavatam. The definition of mukti in the Bhagavatam, of liberation, it's not merging into Brahman. Muktir hitpa anyata rupam swarupena vyavastiti. Mukti is to give up these other forms that we've had. All of our forms now are not ourselves. They're always changing. Like we're getting older, and eventually we give it up altogether and take another form. But we as spirit have our eternal spiritual form. And it's just suitable for serving Krishna. We've lost touch with that, but that's our original form. So Kaivalya, merging is not, it's like going to hell. Tridashapur, all of the heavenly planets with the descriptions of godly delights, it's like an Akash Pushpa. It's like a flower in the sky. Who cares? You know, it's not even real to you. Then the yogis who try really hard to control the senses, they're difficult. Durdantenje, Kala Sarvapatali, Prokata Dangstraiti. And the senses are like poisonous serpents, they'll bite you. You know, the eyes will take your consciousness here, the ears there, and the tongue here, and like that. So they describe something to poisonous serpents. But the same senses are there, but they have their fangs removed. They can't hurt you because you're engaging them in the service of Krishna. So it's auspicious. You need the ears and to hear the holy name. You need the eyes to see the deities, the hands to cook something, and you know, like that, offer. So that's the senses are there, but they can't harm you. And the world, Vishram Purna Sakayate, he also explains that, is that, okay, there's two levels. It's like Prahlad Maharaj. He says, anywhere, anytime, I can chant your glories, my Lord. He's speaking directly to Lord Nrsingadev, and merge myself into an ocean of bliss, just by your glorification. But I'm lamenting. Why? For all these poor souls who don't know you, so I have to stay in the cities and preach and give them you. That's the vision of a devotee. That was Prabhupada's vision. He was sitting in Vrindavan chanting and hearing, you know, half a block from the Yamuna River, you know, but he left there, came to Manhattan of all places, you know, and struggled for a whole year to set up ISKCON because it was the order of a spiritual master and the prediction of Lord Chaitanya, that his name would be sung in all over the world. So he, you know, with $7 in his, you know, worth of rupees, no contacts on this side, and he came to America, and you know, somehow or other he started this movement. And yesterday was the anniversary of the founding of the movement. Yeah, in America. Yeah, July 11th. So then the last thing is Vishram Purna, and then Vidi Kitayate, that all the great demigods like Brahma and Shiva, you know, we honor them, but we don't worship them. For that, they're no more significant for our worship than insects. In other words, thank you very much, you know, but I'm going to go back to my bhajan, you know. And who gets this? Those who have been empowered by the merciful sidelong glance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In other words, who have gotten his mercy by sincere bhakti and preaching and trying to help others. So that's probably refers to that. So these verses there is winding up now, and each verse is very, very important. And he's going to culminate in the essence of the whole Bhagavad Gita, 2 verses, 65, 66, which we're coming to in a minute. But I'm going to kind of give you my little poetic version of them. You can remember. So it says. At 65 it says, just think of me, become devoted, worship me, and bow down low. You'll come to me, O friend. I promise you this boon I shall bestow. Now he's speaking to Arjuna, but we are also Krishna's friends ultimately. He's speaking to all of us. And then the essential verse, the culminating verse, reject all dharmas and surrender only unto me. Your sins I'll nullify, O Arjuna. From anxiety be free. Sarva dharma padajamame kamcharanambraja. So if you can just follow those two, 18, 65, and 66, which have beautiful commentary here, then we can realize the whole purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so we will continue on Monday, and now we'll have our kirtan and worship, the Arti worship. We'll see beautiful Radha Giridhari.
Just one thing real quick.
Say again?
You said that one who obtains material liberation, they are freed from the cycle of birth and death, and they return back to Krishna.
Well,
What does that mean?
I gave the definition of mukti. The common word is mukti. It's defined in the Bhagavatam for how a devotee sees mukti. And it's being free from all of these false forms. Mukti hitva anyatarupam, becoming free from the other false forms, because they're not us. And being situated in one's sarup. All of us have our original spiritual form from the spiritual world, just suitable for us serving Krishna just as we want to serve him. We could be gopis, we could be gopas, we could be cows, we could even be trees, but we're completely, fully conscious. And we're conscious of what? Of Krishna. And we're engaged in the service. And that's our swarup, our original form. These are not, the form is always changing. Haven't you noticed? You get older, you completely change. So eventually it disappears completely. But you yourself continue. That's the whole lesson of the second chapter. And we're not just particles of spirit. We have a spiritual form, a spiritual body, spiritual senses that will be realized by the process of bhakti in this gross form. That's the genius. You use the material senses to awaken your spiritual senses. And we're going to try that now with the kirtan. Nice. Arti. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Haribol.